Welcome to MySecurityTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media. And today we've got some special guests, both in Melbourne and in New Orleans from the US. Georgia Foster, Managing Director for Asia Pacific with Relativity. Georgia, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
And Amanda Fennell, the Chief Security Officer and Chief Information Officer there in New Orleans with, and she also does the Security Sandbox podcast as well. But also
if I could find a few more things to put in there, right?
Well, this is it. Someone with a real job, I always say, has these different titles and different roles along with those responsibilities. So technically, being in the role, you're sort of guiding this ship, Amanda. But I thought we might start with Georgia just to give that sort of APAC connectivity for our audience. Most of them are in the Asia Pacific, but we do have a sort of a larger US podcast audience as well, but they'll all take interest in this. And we're titling this the Security Sandbox, obviously based on the podcast, but digging into the APAC threat landscape with Relativity. And you're somewhat of a unique company that I've come across as well. Georgia, let's start with you and how much traction you've got here in APAC, maybe how long you've been around, but definitely let's start with Relativity and the business that you're in, and then we'll move into how it's connected into cybersecurity.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having us, Chris. It's so good to be able to talk about security and particularly with the APAC landscape lens on it. I've been in the role with Relativity for, I think it's coming up to a year in about 2 weeks.
Right.
And like many in the e-discovery industry, I'm actually not from the e-discovery industry prior, but a very extensive background in technology. And so obviously security's been at the forefront of pretty much every organization I've worked at. For those that don't know, Relativity makes software that help users organize data, discover the truth and act on it. We have a SaaS product called Relativity One, which manages large volumes of data and quickly identifies key issues during litigation and internal investigations. The AI-powered communications surveillance product that we have, which is called Relativity Trace, proactively detects regulatory misconduct like insider trading, collusion, and other non-compliant behaviour. We have about 300,000 users in 49 countries around the world. That serves thousands of organisations globally, primarily in legal, financial services and government sectors. And here in APAC, we're the fastest growing Relativity One region for Relativity. We have over 4 data centers with more to come next year, customers in Korea, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, obviously being a huge base.
Well, it's a massive market, really. It's a really, I mean, I'm ex-law enforcement, so e-discovery is one of those, used to be able to serve a notice and then just basically say, give us everything. And Amanda, there's various different ways we can go with this, but maybe the role of I was going to call you a CISO, but you're a CSO, and I always like that, and a CIO at the forefront of e-discovery in a digital world. You're really at the forefront there in terms of a role of data management. And once you've got that e-discovery, the security of that data sort of escalates even to a higher level because you've got to make sure there's the integrity of that data is maintained, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so same thing as you, actually. I started out background, well, first I was an archaeologist. I don't know if you started out as an archaeologist.
Not quite. But I used to dig a bit, but that's about it.
Yeah. But don't we do that now in digital forensics and investigations? We're just digging and we're nosy. So I jumped into this when I was in my master's program for digital investigations. But yeah, it is really all about making sure that you can find things and what's going on with an investigation. And I worked in the government like you. In the US though, so slightly different. And it's just making sure that whenever you find something that it is admissible and it has evidentiary value, and making sure that you have that integrity. But when it comes down to it, that's what all security is. It's that confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And so I do the same thing here, 15 years later that I essentially was doing 15 years ago, is just making sure that what I find is admissible, that it has integrity, and that it helps us tell the story. And that's what a lot of people are doing with Relativity is, how do you tell what happened, and how do you make sure that you can do something with that data?
I take it it's the same principles that you apply in that, and we do a lot of interviews, obviously, and principles always come to the forefront. Doesn't matter what your business that you're in. When you're in the security role, you're applying these key principles, and they sort of back you up. maybe can you outline what kind of standards or principles you are applying there? Because as Georgia points out, you're a global company, and we've been covering regulation recently as well. Every country has its regulations, they're slightly different. So you do need to come back to principles first, and that generally covers you off on compliance and other types of things. What are those key sort of principles that you find back you up or that you apply as a basis to everything that you do?
It's an interesting thing in security that you're only as good as the judgment of the framework, right?
Yeah,
So
maybe.
Yeah, so it is true that that was one of the first things we did when Relativity 1 as a SaaS platform came about in 2017, in June of 2017, about 6 months before I started here. The first thing they did was ISO 27001, because that's really a great gold standard, for understanding what your security program is like. And I mean, hot off the press, we actually just finished our audit for our annual audit, like I think a week ago.
Nice.
So, and just great output as usual. We have a really strong program with that. We also, this is just, Relativity has this, that we have ISO 27001, we have SOC 2 Type 2 certified, we're HIPAA compliant, FedRAMP moderate certified environment as well for the US government. But on top of that is we're built on Microsoft Azure. That platform, it integrates with, O365 and so on, but they have over 72 different certifications and frameworks and privacy regulations that they adhere to. So we're really strong in our program, and the pillars that we really have behind that are very much prevent, detect, respond. And I've always found that, just to make this like somewhat interesting, I've always found that the maturity of an organization with security is about what part of those pillars you focus on. When you first start out in security, you're like, oh, we can respond, we can do things. And that's how you start, because typically something bad happened and you had to. And then when you get a little bit better, you get better at detection. And then when you get really great at something, you really start focusing on that prevention. And that's where we're at, not to be super excited, but we focus as being threat intel focused, and we are preventative in nature. We ingest over 300, feeds that are coming in at any given time with our threat intelligence. And we also created one for the legal tech community for free to be able to use for their own security. So we're super focused on prevention as those pillars. So we've got the frameworks, we've got the rock star people. Over 55 people globally are focused just in security. And we're very threat intel focused as our pillar.
Yeah. Well, that's your Calder 7. Am I saying that right? Or Calder, depends on which accent you've got. So Calder 7, you have a threat intel team. Yeah, maybe talk us through that, and then their reporting as well. Do they break it down, even bringing Georgia back in, do they break it down into the regions as well? Or is this sort of a global threat intel?
That's actually such a great point to point out, is like the landscape, right? So with everything in security, it is about surface attack reduction, right? You want to have less exposure. So if I have a house, I don't want 10 egresses going in and out that I have to secure. I want less. So I don't want to have data over here that I then have to move over here to process it, or series of different things. I really want to have like a one-stop shop situation where everything can be ingested and protected and has telemetry and so on. So really securing smaller amount, those egresses and so on. And it's a lot easier for us. So with our team, in order for us to do that, we have to case the joint. We have to know what the landscape looks like in APAC, or if we're looking in our EMEA area and so on. So we do have to do a threat profile for each of the different areas. And we are very aggressive about that. So I say Calder 7, but I think it's my accent. So my non-Australian accent.
What's it back? What's it named after? I didn't Google Calder.
Oh yeah, you know what? Nobody ever asks that, but it's actually based upon an artist, Alexander Calder. He actually he created, mobiles that hang from the ceiling and they float around
for babies.
So babies have them,
Maybe.
but he actually created the artwork for that. But
okay. Okay. I think I know the ones. Yeah. Okay. I know the ones. So the ones that spin into each other, right?
They can, yeah. But he created the entire dynamic of using art that way. But the reason that we're named after him is actually right outside of our headquarters in Chicago is a huge red bright beacon statue that this artist had created, and it is referred to as Calder Red. And at the time when the team formed in 2018, it was really about the fact that we were kind of like the only bright beacon for the legal tech community at the time, and we were trying to forge the way for other people. So And 7 is actually the 7th floor of our building is where our team is
Right,
located,
okay.
and we overlook it. So yeah, it's a little, Pixar-ish.
So that's how we
that
can
we're named
find you
after
if
it.
need be.
If you are
If you
looking
can't
for us
find
in
the office,
Chicago,
that's it. Yeah, okay.
yeah, you look
Oh,
for
well
the
then-
red statue in 7, but
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad I asked. Maybe not what I expected as well, I think, in terms of the code of 7, but
look,
at
security
least
is
it's
art.
red. It's red
Security is
teaming.
art.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
is.
Well,
It
there
is
you
red
go.
teaming.
I like it.
It's a lot.
And Georgia, how are you finding because you said you've been in the role for a year, but relatively in the legal community, obviously has that brand name and it's known. How do you find the market growing here as well? Because something out of Australia into Southeast Asia, the development of Southeast Asia as well provides a lot of opportunity there as well. And the regulation around cybersecurity and the expectations on e-discovery, the amount of data we're collecting, how do you find the business grows or adapts to that? It's a really good business model, and even just how I rattled that off of the amount of data, the role of data in business, hence any conflict creates e-discovery opportunity, which brings you guys in. So yeah, how do you find business and the trends that you see here in APAC?
Yeah, and actually when you say APAC, it's funny because for the last year I've been talking about APAC, and APAC is not a thing, right? Like it's sort of the Asia Pacific region is so discombobulated, and it has varying degrees of regulation, of security requirements, of cloud adoption maturity levels, or technology adoption maturity levels as well. And so going into planning, actually, I'm sort of starting to break it down into North Asia, Southeast Asia, ANZ, and India. And, when I look at ANZ, we're quite a mature market, but we're a mature market in terms of our service providers and channel partners that perform the e-discovery solutions that organizations need. What we're seeing is a change in the market where organizations and major enterprises are looking to bring a lot of this capability in-house. The proliferation of data has just exploded to a point where having that capability in-house for a lot of corporates is key. And being a cloud-first organization like Relativity One, it aligns really well with the corporate mandate of sort of wanting to be more cloud-first as well. So there is sort of this synergy, and I think that's boding really well for us being an end-to-end in the cloud platform here in the region. In terms of Asia, we opened Korea and Singapore earlier this year, and even the vast difference between those two regions is really incredible in terms of that maturity of market. Hong Kong is obviously a whole different ball game, and then you start to look at Japan again. So working with Amanda, actually, when I first started, I think Amanda was one of the first people I made sure I knew and got on my radar in terms of, regular contact, because last year when I started in September, it was no secret that the APAC landscape was in trouble. There were 80% of APAC organizations suffering a cyber attack in last year alone. And I think this move to a remote workforce, even though Australia has always worked somewhat remotely to the rest of the world, but a remote workforce in quite a conservative industry, being the legal industry, I think it became really apparent that if you hadn't been taking security seriously, you hadn't been looking at the right technology to be able to enable those people to work from home and do it in a secure way, I think they had to jump on the front foot. So we've seen explosive growth in this region, specifically for our cloud product.
And maybe Amanda, talk us through, are you product facing, Amanda, as well? Yeah. So maybe talk us. I
am.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Talk us through the solutions and then how it's applied, because again, e-discovery is the main aspect here in terms of Relativity as a business, but you're obviously going to be growing. But the correlation and the crossovers with cybersecurity, how the two can relate. I can rattle off a half a dozen, but how does it apply from your perspective as well? Man. Because cybersecurity, that must be another growth area for you.
Yeah, thankfully, because when I had first come in, product security wasn't my forte, but cybersecurity was, and that was exactly what we needed injected, right? So we built out a cybersecurity function for Relativity, but Yeah, so compliance reports into me, as does IT, as does product security, global security that's based outside the US, because we know how important our international areas are, and then also our cybersecurity. So they all report into me. The correlation is actually in, the software development lifecycle. When you create something, it can then be exploited if it's not protected. And so it's really for us about making sure we don't have something for an attacker to take advantage of for an unpatched vulnerabilities, anything in the software, making sure that we can have something mitigated within minutes, if even present at all. And that's why we focus on, like I said, that preventative measures and focusing on making sure that bad things aren't there to be exploited. So for us, it starts with the beginning. It also starts with supply chain, making sure we are tested and know that no threat actors could gain access to the organization, particularly in APAC. That's an area that we focus on a lot. Malware distributed through commercial services. Like you said, I could rattle off like a dozen of these.
I was also thinking,
themed
but I was also thinking,
attacks,
how is it applied? Can your solutions be applied, or as part of a security posture for an enterprise? As Georgia says, they're bringing Relativity inside in-house as well. And I imagine there's applications for a cybersecurity team within a large enterprise to apply this.
That's the first thing that I did when I came in, because I was like, well, the first thing that somebody wants is visibility into the environment. When you want good security, you want good detection, right? And good visibility. So the first thing we did was really make sure we created a security dashboard that a customer can access and see all of those things that you'd want to see about land speed violations, who's logging in, what are they doing, and so on. So a dashboard is one thing, but also if we have people that have a SIM or an MSSP, we have that threat intel feed I mentioned that, is a free service you can connect in there so that each customer can have the same telemetry that we have. We fully acknowledge that we have our telemetry and we know the risk profile that we can do. There's very much possibility that a customer could have access to information we don't know about their own posture. So we want to give them everything we can to enable them. So yeah, we have a dashboard, we've got a feed, we've got our team ready to assist and partner, but that's very much a focus of ours for cyber. And
I suppose the last thing I wanted to also cover, we were going to come back to also the Security Sandbox podcast, and I think that's a communication strategy for you as well. I take it you like doing the podcast. I like doing podcasts. It's one of those things, it's a good excuse, even though you're the CIO, I'm sure you can make that decision, be like, hey, I actually do enjoy the process. How do you apply that communication strategy through the podcast and the Security Sandbox? Because it is something anyone can apply, but obviously it's something internally, as Georgia pointed out, you're a large organization spread across. So it's a good way to get your message across as well.
Yeah, Georgia mentioned as well, she didn't come from this industry. And so, but we needed her. And she was a great addition because she brought something that was different. It was a different perspective. That's exactly the whole point of the Security Sandbox podcast, is that we've got a ton of people that have really passionate areas that have nothing to do with security, but in fact, fortify our security program. So from archaeology to neurosurgery to Krav Maga and so on, we came up with this idea because the security team often does like a happy hour virtually, during COVID.
Nice.
And we end up spending many hours talking about the most random of things. And I realized, I was like, wow, we have so many different backgrounds and such diverse team that loves all of these different things. So we decided, how are we going to do this? We should capture this essence, this passion, this diversity, and have people fortify their security programs more with this knowledge that we can extrapolate from other industries. So we decided we're going to put out this monthly podcast and focus on how to be better at security, how to be better at team building, how to keep people happy, because the talent is everything these days in this industry. How do you prevent, detect, respond to those threats? Whenever you want to use a concept from astrology, I don't know, there's some weird things that come about, but it's also, like you said, it's a lot of fun. And I'm sure I could say no, but why would I? It's so much fun to just hang out with people from my team and then some special guest stars like this and get to talk about topics we love.
Well, I saw there's half a dozen at least. What's the roadmap for you? You just keep it monthly. What's the format and the structure just for the audience? And then we'll obviously have the links in the show notes for this.
Yeah, it's easy. This one, you can download it wherever your podcasts are at. So Apple, Spotify, Simplecast,
and
anything.
That's the Security Sandbox.
It is. And we're on Instagram and Twitter at Secure Sandbox, but Security Sandbox is the name of the actual podcast. And the format, we are keeping it pretty short and sweet. So we've kept them around 20 minutes for each session. And we have this monthly and, session that we're releasing. And we're actually prepping for season 2 right now. And we're really excited. We've got some really cool ideas that are just going to get even crazier. But at the end of the day, we think it just captures that fantastical imaginings of these personal passions and just really helps people bring it into the real world.
I like it. And something else we've just covered off on, we just ran a Southeast Asia Women in Security ASEAN region awards. And it's great to have 2 ladies with us and talking cybersecurity. So women in cybersecurity is quite a strong sort of theme that we like to follow and encourage even just women in tech. It's even broadening out as well. What are your observations in women in security, women in cybersecurity, or women in tech, and maybe any particular roles or recommendations you might have for other women in this role? Because you're both in leadership roles, which is another great thing to see. Maybe from Georgia locally, are you tapped in to say the Australian Women Security Network or the like?
Not so much security just yet, but certainly making headway into the legal tech industry.
Got it. Yeah. Well, there you go. There's another. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Still a very much a conservative industry when it comes to that. But actually, they've found that they've just pushed past. I think it was about 55% women in the legal industry here. So
that's pretty good.
I think that's a really great show of strength. I mean, I'm from the technology industry, and as we know, my prior organization was Uber, and prior to that was LinkedIn, and
right.
So very much been in those at the forefront, very creative and sort of disruption technologies, but very heavily male dominated for quite some time. So I think that we've seen a changing of the guard here, certainly in terms of lower to middle management levels being more equal within the technology industry here in Australia specifically. But I think we've still got some way to go in terms of leadership.
Yeah, well, look, we'll definitely be putting this out onto the local women networks here, and with SECRA out of Canada, they've got a global network as well. And Amanda, yeah, you were keen there to mention something then.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in security, yeah, it's pretty alarming numbers about women in security. It's certainly gotten better in the last 15 years I've been in it. I definitely used to be the only woman in the room all the time, and I'm certainly not the only one now. But I think one of the things that I focused on, and I definitely feel that responsibility, I know and I recognize that I'm a woman, I'm a female, I'm a CISO, I'm a CIO. There aren't many of us. It's definitely a real responsibility and an honor to be able to be a part of that. I've also definitely focused a lot on actually lack of access for people in communities that don't have access to tech. So those are both areas that I focus a lot on. So when I look around the room at my team and I see, yes, there are women, there are other people who are considered minorities, but there are also people who are there who would have never gotten their foot in the door normally because we gave them an opportunity.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I'm definitely looking for, because again, it's about that diversity. And I know that we say that in this industry, and I don't think people really understand how helpful it is, but I don't want to employ people who are going to tell me how to look around the corner the way that I know how to look around the corner. I need people to tell me how to look around the corner in a way that I don't know. Yeah. I need people to tell me to see things that I wouldn't have thought of because my experience is different. So that's what I think that women can bring to the table, and underprivileged youth and so on, is we have different perspectives. I came from that background as well. So I think we got to get people in the door, and we've got to show that we are more powerful with that kind of a thing behind the line.
Great to hear. And I like the career transition you said very early, from archaeology doing your master's. I think something we have covered, particularly women entering the industry, is that there's always that opportunity for that career transition. Cybersecurity is a good one because it requires, the word's not coming to me, in terms of abstract critical thinking. And I think women are very natural to that as well. And yeah, so anyway, it's great to see, and we'll stay in touch in relation to that as well, because I think we can definitely tap you in. Women want to hear more on these stories as well. And they're always interesting stories, which is a little bit off topic on what we were talking about in terms of relativity here as well.
This is mine and George's favorite topic. Bring it on.
Well, yeah. I do like talking about it. It is one of those things, it's almost inspiring. And like I said, we'll, following off those awards, it is something that sort of does encourage me that there's positive aspects in the industry. One other one we wanted to, I wanted to talk about on how do you manage the business Relativity. George, you mentioned the channel. Are you guys 100% channel? Is that the business model? What is the business model, and how do you go to market? So if someone, you know, not necessarily in the legal fraternity, but how do they come across Relativity and engage?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways. Our business has predominantly grown from the immense amount of expertise that sit within our channel. So legal service providers, advisory, large advisory, etc. However, there are a number of different ways to purchase direct if required, if having your own instance within your own organization is necessary, and then being able to leverage the services of the channel, overlaying that as well. So there are a variety of different ways, whether that's direct or through.
Nice. Amanda, globally, what's the roadmap for you? Or are you just finding you just need to just continue to grow that business and adapt, or do you have a specific roadmap or product roadmap?
Oh goodness, yeah. So we actually are very concentrated on the technical leadership executives. There's 4 of us. So product management, Chris Brown, Andrew Watts for our chief customer officer, our chief technology officer, Keith Carlson, and then myself. So the 4 of us with security as the backbone. So the roadmap for the entire product is completely integrated with security wrapped around the holistic program. So everything we're doing has security top of mind. I would say one of the things I would mention is that it's so important for us to stay in front of the industry requirements and needs for those regulations and frameworks. And that's so important in areas like Australia, for sure. So we are right in front of that. We are fully acknowledging and we're in charge of making sure that happens. Georgia is my ear. She's my ears to the ground. She lets me know exactly what we need to be staying in front of. So we are in close collaboration with the market there and making sure that we are great security partners so people can feel secure, like, you know, put your data in my cloud. I can take care of it for you. And then we can also give you that visibility back. And we're just going to keep iterating on that. You know, the visibility for customers is everything.
Yeah.
So that security dashboard I mentioned is something that we actually have a version 2.0 that's coming out this year. It's going to be awesome. The new threat intel feed actually just got upgraded again this year. So we're just iterating upon it and really trying to collaborate a lot with our incident response.
Great. And the threat intel, it's not just a threat report. It's an ongoing threat intel.
It is a feed, just straight up feed for API, JSON coming on in. It gives you all of the raw data that you would want. And we also do so many different signature detections that we make because, hey, we know Relativity pretty well. So we know what should or shouldn't be happening. And we also create those specific detections and we share those with our customers that we work closely with and partner so we can export them if they have Splunk or et cetera. So we just try to do as much as we can to fortify our customers with the protection and security that we would expect. So we do it for ourselves and then we make sure that they can do it as well.
Okay, well, look,
Chris, I might add one thing there. What's been really interesting is seeing the different types of people at organizations that we now engage with because of the work that Amanda's team's been doing. So stepping out of just securing our product and then making sure that we are thought leaders in the space. CIOs, CISOs, CSOs have become an ever more important buyer of our software. So that's been a really interesting change, that it's not just the legal teams that need the actual functional platform, but actually the adjacent or the IT teams that are actually starting to say, well, look, legal, did you think about the fact that you might need to look at this product to make sure that the entire organization is secure? So
well, that's where I was sort of moving from the moment I sort of came across Relativity, I made that connection of, and it's always good to see the security teams talking to the legal teams. They certainly are doing it, as we mentioned, the threat landscape's demanding it because they're having to decide whether they're going to pay a ransom or not, or the regulations are coming into play now, and the onus on directors are also increasing in terms of cybersecurity. So they need to understand what their data is, where their crown jewels are, and what they're actually protecting. So imagine that executive leadership team, a tool like Relativity puts them all on the same page, and they understand those risks. So
yeah, I mean, security is more and more a topic or a responsibility of the board now. So it has to be considered that even this kind of data that we see in the legal departments also need to be significantly protected.
I think the other thing is following, should a breach occur, they need to understand what was taken as well. And I think the legal activity around that, particularly even from consumer bases, also demands a greater activity around e-discovery and those types of things. Like I said, I have been involved in relativity large cases in the past, where you're dealing with large sums of data, and it can take a long time, whereas in the modern world, you expect it to be done quite quickly as well. So look, Amanda Fennell there in New Orleans, the Chief Security Officer and Chief Information Officer, and also the host of the Security Sandbox, and Georgia Foster in Melbourne, the Managing Director for Asia Pacific. Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed that conversation with you both. Thank you very much for joining us on MySecurityTV.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.